So we have a roving mic. If you have a question, just raise your hand at any time. If not, I'm going to start because I've got so many questions. Between you, we're talking about 4 million hectares of land restoration. These are massive projects in their own right, something bigger than the average project we've had here. Very inspiring, but also very challenging. I want to ask you, how do you go about, I mean, these, interesting questions to share between you. How do you go about land tenure? How do you go about discussing, Thomas was speaking, how do you go about managing the relationship between farmers, forests, local communities? Can you enlighten us a little bit? Tom, do you want to start?
Well, I think that the land tenure situation in Spain will be very different to the other countries where we're here, but I'd like to talk a bit about the scale. So how we be reaching these 1 million hectare scale that we're all trying to reach. And with scaling, it's important to recognize...
Sorry, hold the mic closer to you.
Hello. There we go. With scaling, it's important to recognize what are you actually trying to scale. Scaling is a very simple word which is thrown about. It's important to think that you're trying to scale about the different techniques that you're trying to scale. Next to that, be working with a diverse group of organizations that bring in different types of expertise. No one organization can work across 1 million hectares to restore landscapes. You need organizations that are working with farmers, with conservationists, you need government ministers on board. Right. And also with scaling, it's important to recognize the different levels of scale. You have your widening impact, the number of people that you're working with. You have the depth, trying to bring new ideas and embed them into the cultural psyche, and also the length over time. How do you do that project over 20, 30, 50 years? So those are really important things to consider when you think about scaling practices to 1 million hectares.
Florent, could you share your insights about scale and land management? How do you reconcile local land rights with the goals you've set yourself?
Thank you. I think pretty much all the presentation, maybe yours much more, went into the details, the important details. And I loved your 17-step approach.
Yeah.
It's probably 70-step approach.
Yes, probably.
You have to go really deep. You have to go really deep. And I always say that in tech conferences, you mentioned Salesforce and so on. You have to walk people over the process and understand how complex it is. Now, complexity is not a problem in the technological world. That's why these companies and so on exist. But I think there is a lack of understanding how complex this is, right? From a human perspective, working with people, that's probably the most complex things in general.
Yes.
And then how do you develop the technology, the trust, the collective vision, day to day, both on the big mission, but also how do you problem solve every day? So one thing that we identify quite a lot, supported by the technology, by the systems, by the workflows and so on, is building friendships. And to me, that's a very, very important metric. Why? Because those friendships indicate the trust and the proximity that we have with one another in the project to be able to go about the difficult things. It's been a very big challenge to work with Tino. Everybody that has experienced him.
Tell us about the difficult things.
He's a very, strong indigenous leader, has been discriminated a long time in his life. And he's a very proud warrior descendant from the Inca families. And so finding common ground where you have this incredible passion and force, let's say, to lead forward, but then as well building the systems that are able to capture that energy and able to manage it over time, and being able to translate this into the right partnership agreements across an entire, Andean or continent, that has been a really hard thing to crack. But it is fueled by that collective vision, that collective leadership behind people like Tino.
Thank you.
Yeah.
John?
Well, I think it's important keep in mind that the context can be so very different, right? We just heard about the one in Spain. Well, I can tell you the one in Suriname is very different. So imagine a country where 500,000 people live, about 400,000 of them living on the coast, and another 100 dispersed over about 15 million hectares of forest.
Dense forest, yes.
Just kind of try to think about that, right? 15 million hectares of forest, okay? Maybe 100,000 people. Now,
yes.
where do you start? How do you go about this? Because when you fly over it, as I said earlier, lots of green, but there's also some scarring.
Yes.
The deforestation is finding its way. The minerals are there. The roads are going deeper and deeper. They're about a third into the country right now, and they're trying to push it further down.
Of course.
Some people even want to connect Suriname to Brazil. That will be the end of our forest.
Oh yeah.
Let's not go there. Let's talk about what are we doing now. What we're doing right now is working very closely to help implement and maintain the indigenous laws that are already there. So we work according to the Inji law, as we call it, the indigenous laws, because they know how to work with nature.
Brilliant.
So we've been working, CI has been there for about 30 years, and I've been working there for about 10 years with these communities. And they are very simple. This is our land. We will do with it as we see fit. Now, that often means taking care of it and taking just enough so that their future generations will have more. But there are pressures because government services are failing, so people are needing to make money, so gold mining is coming into mind, wildlife trafficking is coming into mind. So that's why we are there to help hold on to the ancient ways to some extent. Using modern tools like data management, the cyber tracker, and we are not there to keep people in a certain way of life. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that there is no conflict between our goals and theirs because we are there to support their appropriate stewardship of the forests. So that makes it easy, right? We're not there to fight them. We're there to help them self-actualize, be empowered, and also have agency. So when we talk about whether it's 1 million hectares or 2 million hectares, I'll tell you, when we started working with the Triuan at some point, we had suggested a protected area of 2 million hectares. They came back and said, what are you talking about? It's 7.
Wow. Okay.
Because we consider this our land, and we stay to the old ways of living in harmony with nature. So since then, we have been working on how do we take that big Triuan concept of 7 million hectares of pristine rainforest being protected, used but also protected. How do we make that real? And that's what TEPU is a part of. So what I showed today is 1 million hectares of that 7 million that we are working together with the tribes to maintain for their health and for the health of the world.
Thank you. Ben, just before we head to a question from the audience, can we touch on this land stewardship that you've touched about, the 20%, 35%? How do you go about managing that with so many people along a corridor, which is, basically the main topic?
I think it starts with building trust, because our challenge to reach any landowner, medium, small or big, is first we have to prove that we are the real doers. Because first we have to explain that we are not this organization, because they all pass by and they promise the sky. So the first 5 farmers, or the first 2 actually, was muito complicado. Then the 5 farmers, we did our work, we mapped their land, and then they see, wow, our mapping team has better maps than their own environmental lawyers. Oh, this gives trust 1. Then within 2 years, we map, analyze, restore, and maintain. Because they are all living on their own, in their own small world. They don't really they're friendly, but they're not friends with their neighbors. So we have to convince one by one. But then, when they see that we also do the fire training at the municipalities, and they come and have a look. Oh, we got the land from the municipality to make a nursery. So this gives the first step of trust. And then we had 10 farmers, and then our team expanded, and we have now around 25 farmers as partner. Still, it's still very small, but I think I always said if we have 20, the next 20 will be a bit easier. In terms of protecting the area where we are working now, around 60 to 70% of the whole corridor, their land has been, it has only one title. They're pretty well managed because they have, this whole area has been deforested around 40 to 50 years ago. So it is pretty well established. And there is the forest code, and there is a deficit. Many of them have a deficit according to the forest code. So we help the farmers to remove this deficit. So it's better for their farm. They don't get any fines anymore because it has to be a win also on the short term for the farmer. And right now they see to build trust and to see why restoration is good for the farmers, because they see that the quality of the soil is going down every year. Because the soil price is so high, they can afford to pay so much fertilizer. But the soil becomes like a junkie. I'm not a forest engineer, but I've learned from all my colleagues, it's a junkie, and each time you have to put more fertilizers in. Right now, the farmers can pay for it because the soil price is like this. But one day, it doesn't. So they see that, oh, to protect the water sources, to put back native trees. Oh, it's good for our own. It's an investment actually in our own farm. So I think now we have around 25. I hope the next conference we have around 125.
Great.
And I think that's the step.
Great.
Step by step.
This aligns really well with the work that Tom is doing, and the trust that has to be built is really the value you're delivering. You know, the roots-based thing. We have a question first here, and then we'll have another one. So please, could you identify yourself?
Yeah, I'm Pete Messerly from the Wies Academy for Nature here in Switzerland. Thanks a lot for great presentations and doing, you know, the ground truth thing while still having high ambitions. So that was very impressive. My question is a little bit, perhaps a naive one, but more from the economic side. You know, I hear you all also having investments from the philanthropic sector, mainly into your projects. I also see that basically the compensation for opportunity cost of local farmers is not, well, they're being empowered, they get a certificate, or, you know, they are given education and stuff like that. They don't really get compensated for not transforming the forest back into a ranch land in Suriname or whatever. So my question is, you know, I mean, that's the challenge we all see and face, but basically the social and environmental value of the forest is not really translated into a price. And hence, I mean, it's great work, but we achieve it basically outside of a traditional economic logic. And does this imply that we're basically very vulnerable against those very driving forces which are continuing to beef up the pressure? And hence, you know, that's a sustainability question we have.
I think, yeah, if we solve that, Nobel Prize.
I'd like to address that, and I might not have made that very clear during my presentation, but the work we actually do is not limited to monitoring and biodiversity tracking. It's also building enterprises. So in Tepu, very specifically, we are building an aquarium fisheries enterprise where they can sustainably harvest some of the fish, the aquarium fish that are present, that go for very high premiums. So there are systems that have been worked out in Brazil, how to do that regeneratively and safely. And that is what we are currently developing in Tepu. And in other communities, we've already developed ventures around Brazil nut oil. And the deal we make is they protect, we help them protect, but they protect, the communities protect it under a conservation agreement. And in exchange for that, we ensure the ventures or the enterprises are supported with capital, market access, and technology. So that is a working model. We have a working model of that in Alapadu, where we're doing 235,000 hectares, and we are going to deploy that model or we are mid-deployment of that model in Tepu for aquarium fisheries. So we don't forget about the economics, because at the end of the day, people need to put food on the table, and they need to be able to pay for their children to go to school and medical services.
Anybody else would like to answer that? That's a very good question.
Yeah, so how can we support farmers to transition? I think it's important to recognize that all of us are voting for landscape degradation 3 times a day in the products that we choose to consume. Most farmers do not want to contribute to landscape degradation, but they are trapped in a system of subsidies that doesn't allow them to do otherwise. Commonland is also working in the Netherlands, where your average Dutch dairy farmer is 1 million euros in debt. They cannot get out of that. Farmers need transition finance support so that they can transition their conventional practices to regenerative ones. They are ready, and they need the financial support to make that happen.
Thank you. We have another question. Could you give that? Could you please identify yourself?
Hi, I'm Sebastian Strady from Regenerating Chile. I was wondering, kind of on a bit of a similar question, but if you can speak to the role of philanthropy within your projects. You're talking about agriculture, you're talking about restoration, you're talking about conservation, and kind of a mix of all of those. I was wondering if you can kind of speak to the difference between the philanthropic approach and impact investment, and how those can either work independently or complement each other for the different projects, especially given the scale of all your projects.
Right, back to raising finance. Who would like to start with that? Can we get you, Florent?
Sure. Does it work? Yeah. So I think in our case, we started based on, in 2018, a commitment, a vision, a dream, and the next best thing that we knew how to do, and we had connections to, was to get going and raising some funds to get going, right? Over the last 4.5 years, we've built, a management structure, a partnership system. We have built some technology to manage all this. We're now in the process, and I loved your detailed, walking over the entire process, because it's been very complicated and it's been figuring out so many different things. But we're now in the process where we come to a conference like this and seeing that the gap is getting quite closer between what the money holders are looking for and what we are actually day by day working on. And what's inspiring to me, and I think it's motivating that work, is beyond the returns, once you see and take the time to go through a presentation like this and are part of the story in the Andes, in the Amazon, the willingness to contribute and to find a way to be part of that results quite a lot. And you know what? How can we get going? Philanthropy quite often is the first step. And now for us, and we haven't solved yet the code, for us is, okay, what do we need to build now to respond on some of the scaling opportunities that we're seeing in the main economic sectors? I must say, it scares me a lot. I'm seeing a lot of conflict, I'm seeing a lot of risks, and I'm questioning day by day, is it the right thing to do? Is it the right thing to do? Should we really tap into those mainstream markets? And when I go around and have people telling me, hey, we have 200 million in a fund and we're gonna work with 3 indigenous communities in Peru and pump that money into these projects, I'm like, well, you better don't do that. It's gonna create a lot of harm. So anyway, that journey is a very important one, of learning, of trying things out, of adaptive management. And I think these conversations between these two still very distant sectors is a very, very important one. And I would love to dive in much deeper into those sub-conversations needed to see the positive opportunities there.
Ben, can you share a little bit about your story in terms of raising capital to deliver your project?
First, maybe I start with trying to raise extra money for our landowners. Because what if a landowner meets all the forest code, all the environmental regulations, and they're part of the Jaguar biodiversity corridor? Maybe in the future we can give them a stamp, say, wow, this soy or this grain or this corn is worth even more. It can even be a little bit more, because we also work, our funding partners are also producers of feed for the animals or importers of these commodities. So we are getting closer to that. I think it should always be a combination of philanthropic, individual, and a sustainable business model. Today, I don't believe too much, I think you have heard that, in standard carbon credits, but I really believe in biodiversity credits. And I really believe in impact projects. A funder can really make an amazing story to communicate to its stakeholders how they support one of these 17 steps. So it doesn't need to be carbon. At the end, we want to save the world. At the end, we want to make it happen. And now that we have 17, or maybe in the future 70 steps, they can say, wow, I am here to give all the 235,000 kilometers of fence to the Black Jaguar Foundation. 235,000 kilometers of fence. Okay. Okay, boom. So I'm here to employ or to pay for 20,000 jobs for the coming 10 years. So that's not carbon, that's social credit. Now let's talk about social credit. Let's talk about biodiversity credit. So much more fun, so much more connected to reality. And so to conclude, I think it should be a combination between philanthropic, individual givers, big corporations, and medium corporations. Without a mix, I think there's no future. But I want to say something else, because I see so many nature organizations. I think once what we are learning or feeling, we have the project and the money is there, you know. And fortunately, I speak a little bit more relaxed now because we really had a funding gap because of the inflation. So I don't know how. Sometimes you need the good energy coming, and thanks to Miss Lynn X this week, she said we have been in touch with her and said, okay, I'm here. 50% of your funding gap is done.
Great.
So there is energy and there is money. So only we need energy to go after it, to explain, and we should explain the complexity of all these 17 or 70 steps. And I think by bringing these people for 1 week to the project also helps.
Thank you. I thought it was really interesting, Florent, in your presentation that you showed multiple streams of funding. And of course, part of that is venture or impact funding, which of course they require a return on their investment. John, have you had exposure on that front? What's it been like, you know, looking for cash?
Well, not easy. You know, it begins with the fact that I have to explain where Suriname is to most of the funders, right? And then we're not on CNN, right? We don't have earthquakes or massive mudslides or big civil wars. I mean, we're just people with forest.
Yeah.
A little boring for some, right? They want to take those boxes. Green Climate Fund wants to improve 3 million households. Well, we don't have 1 million households, so quite a few funding streams are unavailable to us. Add to that we have a classification of a middle income country because there's a lot of gold and oil being exported by a small group of people, which brings the GDP up. Yeah. Most people poor, 70% living underneath poverty. But at the end of the day, you can't access those funds. So it has not been easy. We have been very lucky to have found a number of philanthropic givers, mostly, and after that, some public funding institutions. But as many of you know, public funding institutions are quite overhead laden, and it takes a lot of time. Which, if you're working with communities, to have to keep telling them another few months, or if something comes up, it can become challenging because that type of funding, although it's an incredibly important part of the mix, it's a very rigid part of the mix. Whereas philanthropy, you can have a conversation with Miss Lynn X or whoever and say, listen, something changed. You still want the outcome? Be there with us or introduce us. So philanthropic capital is incredibly important for its catalytic and its flexible nature. And then you've got, let's say, once you've worked out all the kinks, you can go over into these more institutional big funding instruments. Because at the end of the day, they're not going to give you $500,000 to set up a plant, right? They're looking to write tickets of $10+ million, which is great, but you need the machinery. So I think philanthropic capital is there to build the machinery, to do the innovation, get the kinks, get to that 17 or 50 steps or however many steps. And once you've kind of perfected that model, then you can take it either to, let's say, regular capital markets or private equity. I personally think that once you've proven these models with philanthropy, you need to take them out as fast as possible and scale them.
Fair enough.
Once the economics work and the markets are there, make that connection and tap into the power of markets.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions from the audience? We do. Could we have the microphone to the back? I think I can do it. No, it's okay. We'll bring the microphone so it can be recorded.
Yeah, I agree with
Sorry,
all
could you introduce yourself first?
yes, I'm Konstantin Berfeld Reforestation, German reforestation company.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the whole market has the problem that everyone is concentrating on carbon credits, especially what Ben said. And most of the projects have, and no one knows that 99% of world restoration is not linked to any carbon credits. If you think about a country like Germany, there are no carbon credits, but everyone is doing their reforestation. Like your project in Brazil as well, you're doing it without carbon credits. So the question is, how do you really persuade investors to invest into your projects without the credits? But because that's difficult to implement. Getting funding without carbon credits, how do you do that with storytelling, or how do you go about that? Thank you.
Okay, back to Apano about how do you go about delivering a project without credits, or you know, keeping it.
Well, that's a very pointed question, because Suriname, for example, with 0.06% deforestation rate, doesn't have a baseline that'll get you anywhere near significant volumes, right? We've already got 93%. How much do we need? 100% forest, right? So it's hard to even do afforestation. So what we're left with is coming up with ventures, coming up with other methods, like building bioeconomy-based businesses, or in some cases, tackling some sectors that do have emissions and reducing them. For example, I am leading right now one of the first climate-smart forestry projects in the world, which allows for the extraction of timber, but done in such a way that it reduces emissions by about half. So we're not going to stop the timber industry in Suriname, certainly not as long as the rest of the world keeps buying the timber, right? Because as we said, we all are contributing to these impacts by buying things in the store or for a house or for construction. So as long as the world asks us for timber, we're going to provide it. So the question is, how do you do that in such a way that it doesn't destroy the forest? And now we found a way to get carbon credits from it. So I was able to quite easily get that funding. Once we added the carbon credits to the mix, we raised $4 million. Great. The other areas, a bit more difficult. Like you said, more storytelling, more engagement of economic forces, and lots of patience and lots of repetition.
Let's talk to Tom, our storyteller, about that.
Yeah, I think in general it's about awareness building, because many people, especially in the financial world, yes, they hear mitigate climate change, carbon credits, but they're still not aware quite how important ecosystems are, that it's the fresh air that we breathe, that the forests are creating water that huge cities depend on. So definitely building that awareness, and about the complexity of ecosystem restoration. It's easy for organizations to find money to plant trees, but ecosystem restoration is a lot more than planting trees. In the Altiplano Estepario, where Alvalala are working, the major natural restoration activities is actually cutting down trees, clearing invasive species, and harvesting water, building ponds, creating swales. There's a whole array of techniques that need to go into ecosystem restoration. And I really think we need to use storytelling and marketing to capture people's imagination and build that awareness of what restoring an ecosystem over 50 years actually means.
Thank you. We had another question there. Oh, sorry, Florent, do you want to contribute? Sorry.
Briefly, I think if we look at a project level, storytelling is important, and do the storytelling as passionate and as honest and transparent, bring people really through that same story. If we look at scale, however, globally, beyond our individual projects, the funding gap becomes more interesting, bigger. And we always hear that, philanthropy alone will not solve the world's problems and so on. I guess it's true, right? There's a lot of philanthropy and it's growing, but if we respond to the urgency and to the level of how much action we actually need to do in the world, I find that opportunity to tap into those markets that have some very foreign, rules to a lot of local people and so on, and quite often I look around and say, what are we doing? But if we manage to get that on top of what we've been able to build as a mission, as a common story, then I think we're getting into a really interesting place. And I completely agree with you. Carbon credits, but giving nature the opportunity to be investable and attract some capital, nature as a whole, with carbon, with water, with people, I think within 20, 30 years, and hopefully much sooner, we'll be there. And I'm actually one of the rare optimists for this, for our space in this journey.
That's good to know. That's good to know. We have a couple of questions. Sorry, first the lady, and then you, right in the middle.
Hello, I'm Marianne Kirtley from Amaniman Waters Life. I work in Niger, Sahel. This is more of a add-on rather than a question. I try to remind funders, let alone investors, that there's the direct economic opportunities, but also the indirect long-term vision of, for instance, I work in an area of rise in terrorism, rise in climate migration. And so if you look at also the geopolitical conditions around climate change, around how local projects that can really have an effect in reducing poverty, reducing climate migration, reducing, people in my area, they don't join jihadi groups because they believe in radical Islam. They join jihadi groups because they have no other opportunities. And so if you look at, well, how many taxpayer dollars are going towards the war against terrorism? How many taxpayer dollars are going against preventing migration? So also helping people understand that these, maybe we're very local, Brazil and Spain and Suriname and Niger, but these are all a part of a global context. And if we don't do our work, not only does it not impact the biodiversity and the environment, but it impacts our entire global world and our global economy. And while it's hard to get people to think in that way, it's a really important, I think, discussion to start bringing into the equation. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. We'll jump straight into the next question.
Also kind of a comment. My name's Wade. I actually work with Florent at Global Forest Generation, so I might be slightly biased. But back to the point about, how do you raise money? What is interesting for a corporation about giving a philanthropic donation? And I think we have to remind ourselves that as much as we like to think that they're just doing it out of the goodness of their hearts, they're giving a donation also because they want to get something out of it. And it's usually for communications and marketing purposes to show like, hey, we're supporting this amazing project. I mean, we just, Salesforce is one of our biggest donors. We just filmed a huge documentary in the Andes earlier this year. Huge production, 1 week in the Andes, expensive, but, they launched it on their streaming platform. They got, millions of views out of it. How much is that actually worth to them, versus how much it costs them to donate to us and produce the budget? Like, how much is the public goodwill of like them being seen as like this huge supporter of restoration? And that's really like one of the main benefits why they're going to give philanthropic as opposed to just thinking about carbon. And I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Because that makes me wonder, how do you go about choosing your partners? Is it anyone? Funders. Yeah, sorry, I meant from the fund. Is it anyone with money? You're welcome to talk. Do you have a pros? Do you have filters? Will you entertain Shell? Will you entertain Philip Morris? Will you, is there? Ben would like to start.
I just keep it short. I think we have a small but powerful selection committee of potential funders, and they're quite hardcore. And we always look to any funder, small, medium, or big. They should have a whole sustainability strategy and actions in place. So we want to be part of their other initiatives. If we are the only initiative, for example, for any company, just to greenwash their name, then, as we say in Brazil, right? Vamos tomar cafezinho e depois ciao ciao.
We'll have a very small coffee and goodbye.
Because
we'll be polite to them, but thanks, but no thanks.
Exactly, and I think I think in the past 6 months, we said 5 times, ciao, ciao. Because it's very good. Because one wrong cowboy in the range of 100 plus, not only companies, but also families, small donors, will destroy everything. It's not only that we want to secure our name, it's also we don't want to help them clean their name. And I think more and more companies are setting up a whole range of sustainability activities, and that's why we can fit in.
Okay. We have short, limited time, so please keep it brief, but I would like to hear, like, so, will you dance with the devil?
Saying no is very important. It's a very important skill, especially in the philanthropic sector.
Florent.
Especially in the philanthropic sector. We work in the Andes. The entire Andean chain is under mining concessions. We're succeeding in the reforestation that a lot of mines have been always dreaming about and doing small scale and then, blowing up in their magazines in terms of we're doing something and we're succeeding. This year we have, I think, 5 million roughly is our budget. We're being offered significant, bigger amounts of money by mining companies. Right?
Of course.
So how do you say no? How do you, and I think beyond the saying no, how do we start working with the right groups in communicating that no, and how do we turn this into a transition? How do we turn this into a conversation that might have additional opportunities, not necessarily to get the mining sector's money, but how do we have that very important conversation globally and locally about, we're all hypocrites in a way, right? We all depend on mining today.
Of course.
Just we're sitting on the cell phones and so on. So how do we get that part of the conversation as honest and as proactively as we can? And how do we really, at the same time, do our job, show those projects and learn along the way? I think there's a very rich conversation there to have with, some people call it the devil, and understanding how
That's
we
great.
can, yeah.
That's great. Engage until it's safe. John, do you want to share your experience?
Well, quite frankly, it's honest. It's easy to say, I'll never take it. But I think it's also a matter of the situation you're in. I think sometimes you're as faithful as your options. If you are standing at the precipice of the organization collapsing and there's absolutely no more money to be had, you have to fire everybody, close up all the projects, or take some money from somebody that you might prefer not to, then I think that your lens could shift.
Absolutely.
Now, I have been in the fortunate position not to have to make that decision because we've had plenty of donors. But I also don't think myself invulnerable. And I don't think any of us should pretend like we're living in a black and white world, right? There are very big foundations that I can point to that made their money in oil or in the rail tracks or in coal many, many years ago, sure. Has it been washed clean? Maybe. Maybe there's still some karmic debt to be paid. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I think we together have built a society where we eat certain things, we use certain devices, and we use energy that's created in a certain way. I don't think it's a matter of good or bad, good or evil, black or white. I think we all need to make decisions at any given time on how we're going to be doing things from now on. That doesn't exclude or excuse other behaviors, nor would I, for example, take money from certain sectors. That is my decision, but it's also my privilege because I'm in that position to be able to make that choice. Whilst there are many people who are not in that privileged position. And I think that needs to be respected.
And there's also, of course, the point of extending a hand to the organizations that are trying to clean up their act, right? You can't just shut the door in their face. Tom, would you like to give some closing remarks, please, before we move to the next session?
Well, I think that John really said it all. I'd just like to add that perhaps when looking for funding, the work that Commonland has been doing is try to really bring funders on as part of the movement, as part of the journey, and move away from 5-year funding project cycles towards 20 years transformational change, and being part of it for a 2-decade-long journey, rather than just putting some of their corporate social responsibility money into a project to make them look good.
Cool. Thank you very much to our panel. Thanks to Explorer.land for supporting and creating this space. We'll move straight into our next session. Thanks very much. Just a hands up.